I'm Donna, and I want to welcome you to Jesus-Centric Leadership. Good to see you, Pastor Josh.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're not going to be anxious through this episode.
Well, yeah, and we've had technical issues the last two, so we might be just a little anxious, but that's why.
Right. So today, the reason we bring up being anxious, we want to talk a little bit about being a non-anxious presence in an anxious world.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be really transparent. I get on my phone and I start looking at social media, start looking at Twitter, looking at where the world is, and I really do get anxious.
Yeah.
And it's almost like my social media fuels it. The world fuels it. The Dow is going this way, and there's arguments around the world this way. The political climate is going that way, and it's hard. This is going to be a tough one for me because I do get anxious.
Yeah, and I think the idea in leadership isn't that we need to not be anxious. I think if I tell you don't be anxious, right, like I'm not sure, like that's
never made somebody not anxious.
Right, yeah. Stop being so anxious,
yeah,
right? But the idea behind it is that as a leader, that my emotions and how I convey and communicate those emotions are important for the people that I'm leading. That's what I mean by non-anxious presence. What are you communicating? Because at the end of the day, like let's just jump to the end of the book, and we'll talk about the middle, but let's jump to the end of the book. Jesus wins at the end. And so for us as Christians, and that non-anxious presence, it comes not from myself, it comes from the fact that Jesus won at the end of the day. But as a leader, what am I embodying to the people around me? Am I embodying that the world is crashing down? Well, if the world is crashing down, what's still going to happen? Jesus is still in charge, right?
Yeah, and if I can add a question on the end of that, Jesus wins at the end. Can that be enough in the anxiety of my now?
Not enough in the way that I think we all want it to be enough. Not in that, oh yeah, I hear that and I'm going to feel fine.
Right.
But we know that feelings lie to us.
Correct.
And so if feelings lie to us, like most people have probably thought they were in love with somebody and they weren't, right? Like feelings lie. We know we don't trust feelings. So why would we trust our anxiety to tell us what's true? So what I'm asking you to do as a leader is kind of pull yourself out of it, out of the anxiety, and just trust that Jesus has it. And then convey that even when you don't feel that.
Now, I know from experience, I've been on the receiving end of you teaching this. And during COVID, you had conversations with us as staff of being a non-anxious present in a really anxious time. Where did you learn this?
By a big mess up. So I was a pastor in New York before I came here. And part of my job was I worked with our youth praise band. I didn't play up front, but I worked with them. And I had a few seniors that were phenomenal musicians. And they kind of became a little flaky on me. And so the youth praise band there didn't just play every once in a while, they played every other Sunday. And so like for me as the pastor, I'm in charge of making sure not just the students are taken care of, that was important, but that we actually have worship on Sunday. And so they became really flaky on me. And so one day I got really frustrated with it. And again, was it right for me to be frustrated? Absolutely. I had every reason for that. But I let my frustration boil out and I said some things publicly in front of the other students. And what I did, the worst part of it was that I really ruined, especially one of the other girls, I ruined her relationship with one of the seniors because of what I said. And it didn't do any good. Right? Because it didn't make her try harder. It didn't make the students that were there believe that they could do it without the students. It really accomplished nothing by saying it. But I was this very anxious presence when I was leading people. And so he was a CEO of a company, led 100 employees. It just happened to be one of the girl's daughter, one of the students' dad that I had that wasn't there that day, that I was frustrated at. And he came to me, invited me out for breakfast and said, hey, my daughter needs to be there. She should have never done that to you, but I want to call something out. You really affected her relationship with somebody else. That's not your job as a leader. Your job isn't to be anxious. Your job is to trust God to make sure what needs to happen. And so it was just a really good lesson of how I let my anxiety come to the surface in a leadership position in a non-helpful way. And really it's about kind of, I think, watching out for our emotions when we're leading people, because I'm speaking with my emotions as well as with what I say.
Yeah, I can connect with that, because there have been times I function out of that emotion, and if I take a breath and I pause and I put my eyes on where God wants me to be in that moment, it's a whole different reaction on my part. But sometimes I want to go with the immediate reaction, and that can hurt people, like you said.
Yeah, and that's really what it's about at the end of the day. Like, am I building up the people around me, or am I just letting go of my emotions? Now, I'm not saying don't be authentic, don't be real. Like, it would have been fine for me in that situation to say, hey guys, this isn't optimal. We would have rather those two students were here with us, but you know what? I believe you guys can do it. This is who God has set up to play this week. You guys can do it. And I'll be talking to them because we do want them a part of our team. Like, then I realize there's something could be better. I say it, but I'm not saying, hey, it's the end of the world, the sky is falling. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear their leader say that, right?
Yeah, but it seems to be something that our world today fuels. Like, the world kind of fuels this, ooh, I want to make you, almost like I want to make you anxious.
Yeah, I think. I mean,
very rarely do I pull up my Instagram and it's full of niceties and cool things and somebody helping somebody. It's turning its eyes on what's not going right.
Yes, but if we go back to the given, Jesus is in charge.
Jesus wins.
Jesus wins, right? That's the reality. And so if we're going to say that I'm following, as a leader, that I'm following Jesus and I want you to follow me, then I need to trust that God has it, even when my emotions are saying something totally different. And I'm not saying you don't need somewhere to process your emotions. I'm not saying you don't need a safe place to say, yeah, I'm really scared about this. But my question is every situation the time to say just what you're feeling? Is every situation the time to lay it all out on the table? And I think the non-anxious presence understands that you can be really anxious, but when the leader is anxious, it stirs up everybody else's anxiety, and you actually cause more harm than good. And so if you're going to be a leader, you've got to keep that in check.
Just as we're talking of the story of Jesus in the boat and the disciples waking him up during the storm, and if I was Jesus and I said what I was thinking, I would be like, are you kidding me? You just woke me up for this. What is happening?
Yeah.
And did you bring me coffee?
Yeah.
Right? But again, he handled that. He rebuked them a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he handled it. He loved them well in that moment. But he didn't just react out of, I haven't gotten a whole lot of sleep, guys. Ministry's been a little tough lately.
Yeah, and that's what we never hear Jesus saying, right? Come on, guys, you got this. Like, we never, we like the five loaves and 2 fishes, right? Jesus could have stirred up the anxiety. Yeah, guys, I have no clue how we're going to feed all these people. What are we going to do? But what did he do? He, and again, he's God, so he knew what he's going to do, but he's also human. So, like, at some level, like, he could have stirred it up, but he said, no, this is what we're going to do. And he asked questions. And we see it in so many other places, right? Like Thomas is like, Jesus is going to Jerusalem. It's one of the times Jesus is going to go to Jerusalem. And Thomas is kind of at the end of it. He's like, okay, let's go to Jerusalem and die with him. Like, Jesus actually knows he's going to die. He knows this is going to be bad, but what does he do? In that moment, he doesn't say, yeah, it's going to be awful. You guys are going to be scattered. You're going to run. You're going to be helpless. Like, he doesn't say any of that. At that point, he just leaves it alone. Now, there's other places where he tells them he was going to die. But when Thomas is freaking out about going to Jerusalem because Jesus might die, he doesn't. He's confident in that moment. Other times he says he's going to die. And so we see Jesus being this non-anxious presence.
And Jesus doesn't go, And Thomas, wait till I tell you what's going to happen to you.
Right, yeah, you're really doomed, guys, right? Like, Jesus never says that. And he knows that they will be. He knows they're going to be scattered. He knows, like, what's going to happen. He knows it's going to be really bad, but we don't see him stirring up their anxiety about his death. We never, and Jesus knows it's coming. And in fact, Jesus was so, at one point in his ministry, he was so deeply and profoundly bothered by the fact that he was going to die, that he's crying tears of blood. But yet, like, even in that moment, he's not stirring up his disciples' anxiety. They're sleeping. Yeah. His time of greatest stress, they're sleeping. Now, again, I think we need friends that we can cry tears of blood with, right? But when we're leading people, our call is to be that non-anxious presence.
All right, so I always try to bring it back, this question of, we've got people who are, dads and leading, and moms, and they're leading in the homes, and they're leading in the workplace, and they're leading, maybe they're coaching or whatever. And how do I do this in an authentic way? That's real and true, but also understanding this isn't cake in the world. This isn't, being that non-anxious presence isn't easy. How do I do it in a way that's true and authentic to who God's calling me to be, where he has me?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is remembering as a leader that you got to pull yourself above the situation and think out of a place of not just emotions. And so I think it's calling out the emotions, though. So I think a lot of leaders actually miss this first step of being a non-anxious presence, and that's calling out the problem, right? Like, a lot of times we just want to jump to, well, God's got it, it's going to be okay. But actually when we kind of, let's just imagine your car is stuck on the side of the road and you're with your kids. Okay, your car breaks down on the side of the road, right? I think the first step that a leader makes is they don't admit, yeah, this is kind of a big deal that the car is broken on the side of the road. Like, you should say that out loud, right? You should admit that, yeah, this isn't good that we're broken down, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to check the engine. I'm going to call a friend to pick us up. You guys are going to be just safe because, for us, we might say, because Aunt Donna's going to come pick you up and you can ride home with them, and Dad'll stay here with the car, right? Like, I admitted there's a problem. This isn't right. But then I said, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's a lot of times what we want to do as leaders. And I think sometimes it's okay to say, I'm not sure what we're going to do, but I've got some people. I'm going to think and pray about it, and we're going to come up with a solution, right? Well,
I think we have those truth sayers in our lives too. I mean, you've called me out at times. When I get anxious, I can get really critical, and I can be like, the building's going to blow up any second. There's going to be doom and despair, and you've said, hey, slow down. You're looking at this through, kind of critical eyes. You say it very gently, but you say it. And I'm not going to react to this right now. You gotta look at this through non-anxious presence. And that challenges me. And I think it's helped me slow down a little bit. And I think we have those people in our life. It's okay to give them permission to say, hey, if I'm coming at this in an anxious way, don't be afraid to call it out. Because I want to be true to how God's growing me in this moment.
Yeah. And I think asking people, people that we trust to call us out with our anxiety. And, quite honestly, and maybe I've told you this, maybe I haven't, but sometimes you bring stuff to me and it's kind of that, oh, shoot, what are we going to do about that? But like, as a leader, like, what am I embodying? Now, again, if I tell you, well, that's not a problem at all, then that's not good leadership. But if I tell you, if I start freaking out with you,
that's not going to help either.
That's not going anywhere. And so, we admit that, yeah, that's a problem, but here's what I'm going to do. And it might be as simple as I got to think about that and I'll get back to you. Ask me about it in a week if I don't say something, right? But like, we want to let them know. But I think, again, it's really this, if God works all things for good, if God wins in the end, if God can work through our weakness, then we need to embody a spirit not of freaking out, not a spirit of anxiety, but a spirit of trust in God. And there's times as leaders where we have to believe what we know over what we feel. And I think sometimes we know that Jesus is with us, but I don't feel that right now. Well, what am I going to choose to embody for your benefit. My task should be, how do I serve you? Well, I serve you by embodying what I know to be true, which is God's got this, even though I don't feel that.
Now, we're kind of coming up against a line here, though. I feel it sometimes before I process it. Peter, very much that way, right? Lord, wash all of me, or, hey, I'm going to cut your ear off. And, he reacted sometimes in those emotions. We're not saying feelings or emotions or feeling strongly about something is bad. But it's not always leading from a space that's going to exasperate the moment, correct?
Right, yeah. I know feelings are a gift from God, right? But I think we gotta search our feelings and ask, what's real, what's true, what's helpful, right? A leader's going to always ask what's helpful. And I think, and we could talk about, you and I have probably different decision making. You kind of make emotionally based decisions, and there's great value in that. Like, that allows you to make quick decisions, like disaster relief. You're making all these decisions really quick, and I'm like, I can't keep up because I've got to think through it. And so there's blessings in both decision making standpoint. But I think as a leader, we have to ask ourselves not just the question of who am I, but what am I doing for the people around me? And so if my lack of emotions in my decision-making process is difficult for you, I've got to take your emotions into account, right? And so that's in the same way, if you are an emotion-based leader, there's certain situations where you can't let your emotions be out front and visible because that's not good for the people around you. And so I think a leader is always, that's what Jesus did. He was always watching what could he do for people around him, not what was right for him. And a leader is very much servanthood. It's sacrifice, right? I had to sacrifice that day. I had to sacrifice. What I should have sacrificed is I shouldn't have invited other people into my frustration. But what it felt good is I have the right to invite people into my frustration. But that wasn't helpful. It's not always good to invite other people into our emotions, especially if we're leading, especially when they're raw emotions. Now, afterwards, process it, think about it, but not always raw emotions. And that's, I think, a line that we have to follow as leaders. That's hard, but we got to be able to do it.
Yeah, I used to have, it was the Director of Christian Education lead at Seward, and he taught a counseling class, and he said, we really have to attain, just stop and make sure that we're present in the moment and not coming out of a space of self, but really out of the space of what God wants in that moment, what he's leading us into as we lead people in that moment. And that stopping and attaining, just stopping and praying and just being still for a moment even, can sometimes be a game changer to how I respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, and then just pause. I think sometimes we have to do that in leadership. Hey, I need to call a 5-minute break or whatever it is. I need to go to the bathroom. Sorry, guys. Little things like odd things like that to deal with your emotions in the midst of it.
So do you feel like this concept in leadership of being a non-anxious presence is as helpful for somebody who's working in the church as it is to somebody who's a teacher, as it is to somebody who might be working at Buckley, as it is to somebody who owns their own business?
Well, I mean, probably the listeners know that better than me because I only know this world. But yeah, I think because people are people at the end of the day, and God is God, and people feed off our anxiety. And so I think this is true with people in the church and outside the church. And so I think being a non-anxious presence will help you with your kids, with your spouse, with coworkers, with employees at work, I think. But you tell me. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, right? Well, I feel a little less anxious now, so thanks
good.
for that. But thank you guys so much for joining us on Jesus-Centric Leadership. Donna, this is Pastor Josh, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great day.